Hey everybody, welcome to Unabridged Bookstore's virtual event space. We're so excited that you are here tonight to help us celebrate the release of Saga Boy, Blending Mythology and Memory. This book follows a young black immigrant's vibrant personal metamorphosis. We're so thrilled that the author, Antonio Michael Downing, musician, writer, and activist who's joining us from Toronto tonight. Antonio Michael also performs and composes music as John Orpheus, and we're so thrilled that he's joining us here tonight to talk about the book. Moderating this conversation is Michael Kleber-Diggs, the author of Worldly Things, which was awarded the 2020 Max Ritvo Poetry Prize. Michael was born and raised in Kansas and now is joining us from St. Paul, Minnesota. Michael also teaches poetry and a creative nonfiction workshop through the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop. So we're very thankful that the two of them are here tonight. Help me welcome Antonio Michael Downing and Michael Kleber-Diggs.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. Brother Antonio, how are you?
I'm so blessed, Brother Michael. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to bless Chicago at it from a distance. I've lived around these Great Lakes all my life, and Chicago is the one city around the Great Lakes I've never been to. So I guess I'm here. I'm breaking that seal right now.
Virtually.
Yeah,
and
virtually.
when it happens for real, let me know. I'll meet you there.
Yeah, you're not far off either. Yeah, for sure.
So I had the good fortune, and all of it I think was accidental, because when I got the request to join you tonight, I don't think the team at Milkweed knew that I reviewed the book for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune.
Oh, they didn't?
No, because they also asked me if I needed a copy, and I'm like, oh, actually, I'm good. I just read it, and I know that you've had a chance to see my review, but in a nutshell, I just love the book. I have so much admiration for the way you talk about people and place, and so many things, so many wonderful conversations, so many complicated ideas being presented through your lived experience, and you just do it with tremendous skill as a writer and as an observer. And it was a real treat to read the book, and it's a real honor to be in conversation with you tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. That means a lot. I did read your review, and I thought it was so insightful, and as I was saying before, I love how when a reviewer really cares about the book, you can learn perspectives that you hadn't even thought of, you cook the food certain ways, and you don't even know how it hits people. And so I appreciate that. It was a revelation for me. And so I thank you for that passion and for that attention. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So I have some questions that I typed up, make sure I was ready for the conversation.
You typed them up. That's great.
Typed them up. I took it real serious. And, the first one for me, because on a level, we're just talking brother to brother. How's the family, man? How's everybody doing?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. It was a tough summer for the family, but it was also an uplifting one. We had the eldest, if you read the book, the book is very much a saga of sort of colonial poisons inhaled by generation, and then passed down trauma, especially abandonment. When you talk about the Saga Boy, my grandfather was the Saga Boy, my dad was the Saga Boy, and I've been a little bit, and my brother, my older brother Junior, who's in the book a lot, his eldest daughter was the eldest of our generation, and he was kind of estranged from her. He spent most of her life away from her on the other coast in Vancouver, and I barely knew her, and she passed away, unfortunately, this summer. And it was one of those things where it's like you shouldn't have to bury a 25-year-old for no reason. but it was a coming together of the family. And I think it was a bit of a wake-up call, because we're so scattered across continents, and we're so used to being alone in that struggle, that we came together for this moment in ways that even folks that didn't even know Janisha at all came together. And there was a recognition that we had to make a stand on this sort of inherited trauma. We had to make a stand for it. And so that's resulted in a lot of closeness, a lot of more high contact with everyone, a lot of just blessings have sort of, we've reaped some fruit from that bitter tree, but the fruit is some sweet fruit from the bitter tree is what we've reaped. So so that's where we're at. That's where we're at. We've been sobered, we've been chastened, we've lost, but we've been uplifted by that loss.
Yeah. You know, this is a question I kind of had in mind for later, but it's so present in the answer that you just gave me. Last week, Ocean Vuong, the poet and novelist, put up on Instagram, and Ocean, like I'm going to talk about him like I know him, but Ocean has a tendency to put these complex ideas in serial form on Instagram. And one of the things that he said is that white critics fail to recognize and remember that joy, tenderness, and levity, they fail to see joy, tenderness, and levity in narratives about Black people.
Yeah.
And as I read your book, I absolutely see the travels. I absolutely see the difficulties and the adversity, not only that you face, but how that affects generations. And you brought up colonialism, and the legacy of colonialism in Trinidad is present in the book, and the legacy of colonialism in Canada is present in the book. And you handle those conversations with grace, and you keep the narrative centered on this family that's traveling through these places that are affected by colonialism. But there's so much love in the book. There's so much resiliency in the book. There's music in the book, and dancing in the book, and forgiveness in the book. There's joy, there's tenderness, and levity. And I want to make sure that we recognize that it's in our cultures and in our traditions, it's always going to be both. We're going to have that adversity and that levity too. And I wondered if you could just kind of talk about that in the book and in your life.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for saying that, because that is one of the things in your review that I noted. I could see, I was like, wow, because it's so prevalent with white reviewers, where they, it's tragedy and struggle and resilience, which sure, that's there, but all of this other stuff, and I don't see that when I look at it. I see the joy. I see the jokes me and my brother used to make when we were kids, and pretending we were preachers, and I see the humor of being in the middle of northwestern Ontario, north of where y'all are now, like back then, because that's way out there, and we're the only Black family in this town, and it's like, there's so much humor in so much of it, and I feel like that rarely gets commented on, and it was such a breath of fresh air to read your review for that reason, and I hadn't quite put my finger on it, so I appreciate you doing that. But that is what it is. It's just really hard, and as a writer, because you said it so eloquently, I mean, I can't add anything to that other than yes. But I'll also say that as a writer, what I appreciate is that there's if you read a memoir, let's say like Angela's Ashes, a white writer, great memoir, tremendous memoir. A lot of times I think of Ireland, which is another colonial island. That's where the British practiced colonialism before they came to our island. Right. And so I feel a lot of connection to the Irish writer. So I read a lot of memoirs in the making of Saga Boy, but when you read about those books and books by white writers who are memoirs, where, I mean, there's a lot of struggle. I mean, it's Ireland in the Depression, and there's poverty, there's kids dying, there's all of this stuff. But when you read the review, they talk about that, but a lot of it, they spend time on how it's written, because that's what's great about that book. It's a lot of it is how it's written, which any book you love, it's not just what's written, the substance, but how it's written, the style, because the style can become substance, because a style is a value system.
Right. That's right.
A style is, like the famous trope of the Inuit having 50 words for snow. It just says, this is important to us. We need words for it. So when you choose words for something, which is style, there's a lot that comes with that. And white reviewers, I find, never talk about the how. They just talk about the what.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're reviewing a book like by a white writer, it's not just about the how, because because the truth is, the how is actually the what, is actually common, right? Like there are a lot of these stories there are a lot of books about these stories from the Caribbean. I'm thinking about Edwidge Dandicat's Brother, I'm Dying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about a Canadian fellow, David Cherryandy's Brother, incredible book. I'm thinking about Jamaica Kincaid's An Autobiography of My Mother. Like there are a lot. The what is very much something that these are stories, and any immigrant life has these stories. Any migrant life, if you read stories of people coming from Europe to North America, it's the same thing. And even lives of people that haven't migrated, there are tragedies, and there are joys, and there is family tension, and brokenness. It's everywhere. So the how is actually, for me, the most interesting part. And I feel like, and that's what I take the most pride in. And that's what I loved about your review. It's like, you actually were like, wow, the way you're doing this, here's the story, but the way you're telling it is really moving me in these ways. And as an artist, as a writer, it's about your craft. You're an expert on craft.
Right.
I'm not even an expert on migration or Trinidad. I'm an expert on my Trinidad and my migration, but that's it. Yeah. What I am actually an expert on is the craft of writing, and so it always disappoints me that gets bypassed by white reviewers, as well as limiting the story, always boiling it down to resilience.
Right. That's right. And there's I think some real specific reasons for that, because when you're a white reviewer reading about Angela's Ashes, you don't necessarily feel connected to that adversity. But when you're a white reader reading about the impacts of colonialism or racism or those types of things, that becomes prominent for you. And the writer,
you think that's what it is?
I kind of do. I don't know if I'm right about it, but I do feel like the writer becomes almost secondary in that.
Yeah. I feel like, I always think it's because the other, right? When it's like, oh, this guy looks like me, like similar everything, then you're kind of like, oh, I know this kind of story.
Right.
How does he tell it?
Right.
But when it's the other, you're just like, oh, well, this is all new to me. This is all different. What? Family drama? Really? I've never had that. It's like, it's like as if everyone doesn't have complicated relationships with their parents and their family, and as if we all didn't migrate from somewhere to get
That's
here.
Right.
Unless you're indigenous, you came from somewhere. But it's very alien, and now you're like focusing. You're like a tourist going to the zoo or going to Africa, where you're just touring, and you're like, oh, look at the sights. You don't actually you don't see yourself reflected in it.
Right.
And which is, again, I think is an illusion, because I think at the end of the day, like all of this stuff is actually part of all our lives.
It's universal. It really is. I mean,
It's not.
Yeah, everyone's got unprocessed grief. Everyone's got ancestral trauma. Everyone's got a diasporic experience if you go far enough back. These things are universal. Now, of course, the differences are important too, but writ large, the human struggle is the human struggle.
Yeah. And if we've done our jobs as writers, if you're not operating on that human level, you're not operating at all. Right. If we've done our jobs as writers, someone should not need to be like, for example, you're not Trinidadian, you're not from the Caribbean, but you could see yourself there. Absolutely. And you shouldn't need to be a migrant, an immigrant from anywhere, from the Caribbean, Black, a man. You shouldn't need to be any of that to see yourself reflected there if we've done our jobs. And so that's why it's frustrating for me, because I really believe that universality is that's the secret sauce.
Right.
And until you can get to that level, until you can access the universal through the personal, you're not really doing it yet. And
that's right.
And so when you take that away from me, I'm like, damn it.
Put it back. And the thing is, yeah, you missed the music. And I mean, really one of the things about Saga Boy that I just really responded to, and I think it's a lot because you are a musician. And I think also it's because Trinidad is in your bones. And when you're writing and typing, it's present there. And when you're saying what your grandmother said to you in this moment, you're presenting that in how it sounds. And so the music of the language, the sound of the words become part of how the book is told, and that carries all the way across. That musicality, those tones, those rhythms in the language.
It's a very Trini thing, because the Trinidadian style is like, Michael, you're doing a conversation tonight. And so it's very much like, it's very melodic. It's very melodic. Yeah. It's very, and the rhythm, like my mother's classic line, which happens over and over in the book. She says, "Child, I am your mother. You will have many friends in this life, but only one mother. Don't forget that." And that's like, which is why I loved reading the audiobook, because I got to put that music in it. And very much so, I mean, I think you've picked at the great tell of the way I write is, how people speak is really important to me, because like I said, I went to 6 high schools. Yeah. And how do you get accepted as being from a place? Well, you talk the talk.
Yeah.
Because how do we know you from South Side of Chicago? Because you sound like you from South Side of Chicago, right? And that's about the music, the rhythm, the cadence, the diction, all of that. And I'm always listening for that, because as a kid moving around, if you wanted to fit in, I figured it out very early. It wasn't even what people said, it was how they said it. And I had to listen really close to how people said certain things. Right. And so when I write, that's what you hear. Like, I was obsessed with words as a kid. Like, when I heard new words, I would just say them and roll them around my mouth and savor them. Like, and just, where is it hitting in my mouth? I would just say it. I was like, oh, like we had a place, because a lot of the names in Trinidad, the town names are split between French, English, Spanish, and indigenous, Carib indigenous. And the Carib indigenous names were the best. They were like Oropouche or Guayaguayari, right? And then I would just say those names so much. When I used to love soccer, and when I watched the World Cup, I would just walk around fascinated by how each country's name sounded a certain way. If you were from Italy, it ended in a vowel, right? Like Pellegrini,
Oh yeah.
like, you know, like Sandro Palo Alto, you know, and I was just, and I would just say the names. And so, yeah, that's the tell for me, because I always feel like how people talk reveals demographic, education, white collar, blue collar, like continent, like it reveals so much. And so I'm always doing that in Saga Boy a lot, but just in life. I'm obsessed with it.
Nice. I wanted to ask about the subtitle.
Yeah.
My life of blackness and becoming.
Oh man, can we get 100 real? Can we get all
Yeah,
the way real? Can we get really real? Okay.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna break it down for you.
Please.
And I'm gonna try to be brief, because I speak in parables and podcasts, so I'm gonna try and keep it short. So the original name of the book was Becoming John Orpheus, and which is my stage name, my performing name. And it was that because I, in my complete wisdom, thought that I was writing a book about music, and my family was the backdrop. Like, music was the picture and my family was the frame. Come to find out, I'm writing a book about my family is the picture and music is just the frame. And so that title, which was all about my music, didn't make no sense anymore. And so I came to them and I said, look, I want to change it to Saga Boy. Now, Saga Boy is a Trini-centric term. If you read the you know, as you finished your review, talking about Saga Boy is like a Trini dandy, a Trini playboy who's, you know, always looking good, wearing fancy rings, looking pretty, and had a string of women, you know, that they would be known, or run a string of trees, as they say, as the colorful Trini phrase go. And they were like, no, we can't use that because nobody's gonna know what that means. And they had a book, David Cherry-Andy, the same David Cherry-Andy, he is descended from Trini people. And so he had a book called Sukunya, which is a sukunya is basically a vampire, but it's a French word, sukunya. And no one knew what it meant, and they thought it had affected sales. So they were like, nah, we can't do this Saga Boy thing. And eventually they got some pushback from retail on the Becoming John Orpheus name, and they came back to me, and I was like, okay, how about Saga Boy? And they had a bunch of suggestions for taglines, which I hate those lines because it's not poetic enough for me. It's too literal. You know what I mean?
I do.
Oh, like Saga Boy, a black guy from Trinidad story, like, you know, something like that. And I'm like, nah, I can't do that. So I'm like, okay, if you're gonna give me Saga Boy, I'll write the tagline or the subheader, and it's gonna sound nice. And so I did the alliteration, and obviously those are two core themes of the book. Nice. And so I nailed it. I sent it over. They were like, okay, cool. And that's how we got to this point. But
you meant 100. Like you were like
100. Yeah. Like I might get a terse email tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's how it is. One of the things that I'm fascinated by is, did imagining the project as being about John Orpheus, and music with the family as a frame, give you the permission to begin the project that eventually became about the family?
Yeah, I would have never. I was, the reason why I avoided the family was because it was painful.
Yeah.
And I'd hidden stuff, and there was stuff I was still hiding from in myself about it. And as a result, I didn't want to go there. But then there was a point where I did the first draft, and my agent, my very funny agent, Chris from Westwood, he said, look, We know what string you broke on what song and who was on stage with you when you broke it. But we don't know what it was, what you felt like when you met your mother for the first time at your age of 25 and got to have a relationship with her.
Right.
One of those things is much more important.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of like, yeah, he do have a point. So I had to cut out a lot of basketball, a lot of a lot of bands, and a lot of X's.
Yeah.
To really, but the truth of it is, the first half of the story, the Eden, which is me in Trinidad, is very much Garden of Eden stuff, because that's where the innocence is, but it really was like a jungle. So it was a garden and growing things. And I kept those stories close to me and I would tell them all the time. But everything after that, like from a writing point, that first part where it's very lyrical, it's very flowing, it just poured out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the rest, I kept trying to write it that same way. And I was like, no, first of all, you don't even remember a lot of the stuff that happened after. Second of all, you've never told those stories. And third of all, it's not Garden of Eden time anymore. So you need a different way. And so the actual way I'm telling the story shifts when I get to Canada.
It
and
does.
And so it was hard for me to go through and dig into those things and really get into it. And it was heavy lifting, heavy emotional lifting. And Brother Kiese Layman, who provides like the most ridiculous, like he says, I don't know if y'all know Kiese Layman, he says,
oh, come on now.
Dazzling. This is a book I will reread forever. That's what he said. But here's the story of how I got there, because how I did this heavy lifting was I interviewed 250 hours of interviews of mostly family, but people who'd known me from since I was like a bump in my mother's belly, and to right up to when I started writing. And I was writing and I was sitting at my counter in Toronto, and I was reading the New York Times book review, and Heavy, his Brother Layman's book, Heavy, came up. And I read the description. I was like, you need to stop what you're doing and go buy this book and read it. And that's what I did. And I didn't continue writing till I'd finished it. And it was it was just so profound and deep and so naked and so vulnerable. And for the whole entire time of the writing, I was just like, whenever I felt like I was hiding from something, I thought about Brother Kiese and Heavy, and I was like, yeah, you got to get realer.
Yeah.
And what a magical journey that book inspired my writing of Saga Boy, and then he got inspired from reading Saga Boy, which was just blew my mind, because I've never had that experience where you read a book and it inspires you. It happens all the time. But then to have that writer then read what you created off of that inspiration and then be inspired by it, well, that's just nuts. And but yeah, it was heavy lifting, and the only way I got through it was because of people like Brother Kiese, like Audre Lorde Zami, even Frank McCourt's Angela's Ashes, like I just read so many memoirs. I just went so deep in it because I wanted to understand the form, and of course, Maya Angelou's Cage Bird, and quite a few, and the only way I made it through was having these, having the same, like my grandmother would pray a prayer. She said, Lord, ring your angels around this boy. And I felt like all these writers that had gone there before were the angels, kind of lifting me up, because it was heavy. Sometimes I write 20 minutes and I gotta breathe for 40. Because some of it was really that moving, because really I hadn't gone there, which is what triggered the writing of the book in the first place.
Right. Summon the ancestors.
Yeah, you got to.
I have to say and I don't want to get in front of the book for the people who haven't read it yet. But there are moments along the way when you meet your mother and other moments in Trinidad and Canada, in America, when what's happening is heavy for the reader too.
Mhm.
Asa Lehman's book, Heavy, changed my life on a number of levels. But one of the things you can't help but think about when you read that book is, it's okay to say it. Like, let's
Mhm.
just say it. That we're not going to
Yeah.
let this have power over us anymore. Let's just write about it and say it and share it.
Hmm.
I spent so much time thinking about how his writing about his mother, in effect, like, in some places you say put her business out in the street, but I also got to read about conversations that he had with her, and she's like, "This is your story.
Mhm.
Tell it." And I
Mhm.
wonder, have you talked to family? I mean, obviously, you interviewed family members ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
But have you talked to them since the book has
Oh
come
yeah,
out?
of course I have. And it was like, I'm glad you brought this up. They're hilarious. I'm like, um, I talked to everybody, all the key family members that are in there. I talked to them before I interviewed them for the book. I talked to them since, but I thought, and part of that was to fact check myself, to
Yep.
trigger memories that were that were latently hidden, and just talking about it would like open it up, which always happened. But also to, I read a lot of memoirs, but I also read a lot of the stories of memoirs, and so I was aware that it's often the case that family members get real upset and even stop talking to the authors. And so I did all those interviews to also give people an opportunity to tell me, hey, I'd rather you not write about that, or just to bring them into the process. So you would think that that headed off a lot of the fury. Nuh-uh. My mom, this is me and my mom. My mom jumps on the siblings only Sunday call. So all my Trinidad siblings, we got a Sunday call. She jumps on. She's like, eh, Mr. Michael, you're writing book and you're putting people business out in the street. I'm like, Mom, this really isn't the place to really talk about. Well, well, I want to talk about it. I'm like, well, Mom, let me call you on Friday. I'll call you Friday. I'd say, oh, okay. Call her on Friday. She's like, so Mom, what are you mad about in the book? Well, you talk all of this and blah, 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 and you lie about this. You're telling lie upon me. I'm like, Mom, what specifically are you upset about in the book? Like this, and this. I'm like, Mom, you didn't read the book, did you? I'm like, well, no, they just told me, and they told me I don't want to read it because this was. I was like, okay, Mom, how about I send you a copy so you can be mad at me for stuff that's actually in the book instead of what you're doing
Right.
now. And then there was a point where I just had to. Everyone was upset, and I think everyone went book mad for a couple months when it came out in Canada. And I think part of it had to do with like, we're all very protective of our stories. We're protective of it because our memories are stone cold liars. Our memories are liars who are hired, they're solicitors hired to lie for us in the court of life.
Yeah.
And so we think our memory is a recording of facts, but in fact, our memory diminishes what is inconvenient, um, embellishes what is convenient, deletes what it can, invents what it needs to. And then my favorite technique is the Vaseline on the mirror technique, where it's like it's there, but it's all out of focus because you don't want to look at it clear.
Right.
And so people are very protective of their narratives, and so
Yeah.
there's a violence that happens when you write a memoir, and unless you're living in a cave, it's other people's stories too.
Right. That's right.
And there's something about seeing it in print, even if no one will ever read it, that really makes people feel like, hey, I've been violated because I want to tell it this way. And I just had to push back on that. I set out and I said, look, let the sweet be sweet, let the sour be sour, let the truth ring its own bell. And so I respected them by having those consultations, but I wasn't about to let anyone tell me how to write it. And so I eventually had to say, look, and it's hardest with my mom. My dad's a hustler. He's just like, boy, make that money. Whatever you gotta say to make that money, you make that. My dad was just like, and he comes off the worst in it, but he was just like, you do what you gotta do. Just let me hit you up when you got it. That was the quiet part he didn't say. But mom, and for my siblings, it was just like, look, I love you guys, and I know you are great people. And I know who you are in your heart, and I trust those people that you're gonna get there. My mom
comes out, and that comes out. That comes out.
Yeah, it comes out, and after a while, they realize, wow, I'm not Kanye West. The IRS isn't going to call them. The police isn't going to knock on the door. The feds aren't coming. Life goes on, and so now they've come to a place where they're really proud. My mom, I had to just say to her, Mom, I love you. I care about you. I tried my darndest to make this something, to tell your story and be fair and kind to you. And if you read the book, I think you'll see that. But at the end of the day, if you don't like what I wrote, write your own damn book. Write your own book, right? Because this isn't, you're making something that's about me, about you. And and I was just like, Mom, go write your own book. My mom was claiming that something was a lie because it happened before. It was a story from before I was born. And she claims it was a lie, but 4 people who were there can corroborate that it happened. Right. And it's totally in character with her. She cussed out someone, which is my mom's, that's how my mom speaks, and anyone that heard the stories, and so I was just like, Mom, I'm sorry. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, you want me to write exactly the word, so that's how that went. And Caribbean people don't like airing the family business, but what people do really, like Asian people don't like it, African people don't like it, European people don't like, nobody likes airing the family business. But I also knew that it, when the parents say, oh, I can't tell you that story, I have to protect you because it's a bad story, but really they're protecting themselves. Right. And they use the code of silence to not tell the story and did not deal with the pain, and therefore perpetuate this trauma. And so I wasn't going to be that dude. I was on a mission where I was like, that's where I draw the line. We are talking about this.
I feel that in my core. We're going to have to talk separately. I just got to tell you that right now. I will not forgive myself if we don't talk about 2 things before we go. The first is, one of the things that I just really like, when I finished the book, I did this is what I did. I was just like, how did he do that? So here's one of them. So in the book, there's Saga Boy as a concept. It's appearances, it's how that's functioning. There's masquerade culture in Trinidad. Right. And then there's you. I was gonna say there's this character, there's you navigating life through these personas. You begin the book with an Oscar Wilde quote, "Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth." And I love that you were just talking about, like, we're just going to tell these stories. We're still family. We're still together. I still love you. I still care about you. In fact, I took care in the telling to get it right because it matters to me to get it right. But so there's mass culture in Trinidad. There's the Saga Boy tradition itself and in your family. And then there's you navigating life through these personas. So you go through as Tony when you're a child, as Dainjah, which I think of as kind of like your chaotic teen years. Michael Downing, like corporate climber, like Molasses, the spiritual incarnation of yourself. Right. And then Of course, John Orpheus, and that's the last question that's the last thing I for sure want to talk about. But the levels of the way those veneers are functioning nationally within the family and within your lived experience to me was just awesome. I really, really kind of resonated with it. But I wanted to ask about the personas, and I wanted to ask about what it was like to go back in the book and reflect on Tony, reflect on Dainjah, and as you're giving us those different components and remembering those moments in your life.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, the book started when I hang out with a lot of women who love crystals in my band, and witchy woman. And they sent me to this, they always get me to do ridiculous things. And so they sent me to this shadow work session. And it's supposed to like pull up all the terrible things from your childhood. And so I went there, I'm like, yeah, bring it. I want to feel it all, get it all out of me. It's going to be a lot of weeping. And it was like a guided meditation in a darkened room, about 30, 40 people, and people are sobbing in the corner. And every time I try to settle into the meditation and listen to the voice, it's like little Tony, this little cocky shorts, little shiny forehead, because probably like you rub some baby, some baby oil on his forehead. And he's just grinning, and he's like, he just keeps presenting himself in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, shh, I'm trying to do this thing here. And then after the third time, I was like, oh, maybe you're the thing. And so I turned out, I in my mind, I was like, I just accepted this presence. And he was just like so smiling and so happy. And he's just like, yo, we can let all this stuff go, right? You know that, right? And I was just like, it was like the kid at the back of the class who knew the lesson already. He was like, yeah, we can let this go. And I was like, yeah, I know that. And he's like, oh, so we can just hang out? I'm like, yeah. And he was so happy. It was like, I miss you so much. And Junada hit this last night. She was like the black joy, the black boy, the joyful, loving, kind, affectionate little boy. That's who little Tony was. And when I connect with that, even when I speak Trini, my face lights up. Just by speaking it. I can actually hit notes when I sing in Trini that I can't hit when I sing in Canadian. And that was him. And that's where the book came from. And beyond that, I mean, all the other things were just phases and times. But, for me, Dainjah was just like, that's that period where I long for my parents, and finally I get my parents. And that doesn't go well because my parents are my parents, but I love them. And I just wanted to forget everything. Yeah. This visceral sonic vibration, and punk rock music made sense because it just meant that it was like, screw everything, like, let's break stuff.
Right.
But I did it in this transcendent gospel preacher kind of way. And then from that, Molasses was when I was starting to kind of, I saw Al Green in Memphis preach at his church, and he just like, he was so transcendent, and I was just like, wow. And so I'm like, yeah, we need that soul. That's the soul. And then that just took me on this trek. Then I'm coming right back to Trinidad. Right back to the family. And and then John Orpheus was just, who I still perform as. That was just a moment of wanting to create something that included these stories and to hold these stories. Like in fact, the first chapter sketch I ever did for Saga Boy was when I was sketching out what John Orpheus's backstory.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that. I was writing the book, and I looked back in one of my journals that I still had, and I saw that I'd sketched it out 10 years before.
Wow.
And so for me, the mask is how I get to my truth. But you think about it, in Trinidad, like playing mask and masquerade culture came out of, you know, French was the dominant, like, sort of overseer of the island, and the French folks had their masquerade balls, but we weren't allowed to go, and so they would throw their own masquerade. That's where playing mask comes from masquerade, like the Marie Antoinette masquerade, and they would make their own masks. They would play their own masks, making fun of the overseers, and it evolved into this 3 days in the year where the slaves would be allowed to run wild and run free. And so the mask gave you anonymity, so that you could express yourself and free up your body that otherwise was chained and maimed and condemned to servitude. And so literally that mask is the way we let it all out, the truth that's in our body. That's how we let it out. And that's what I was doing with those personas. I was assuming these masks because they allowed me to get to a truth that I couldn't get to anywhere else.
Yeah.
I couldn't get to anywhere else. And then, you know, the corporate mask was just simply about, I couldn't fully be myself. So to me, it was just a role. I studied lit, which was, you know, a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of theater. And I was just like, oh, so there's a role, there's a scene. They even use the same language, right?
Yeah.
They say a good salesperson is a top performer, you know, or a sales role. And so for me, I just saw the theater in it, and I was like, oh, well, I'm good at that. And so I just that's me leveraging the mass so that I can like play the game that they wanted me to play, because I couldn't show up as myself. And showing up as myself was what, as Black, as an immigrant, as a Trinidadian, as an artist, was always severely punished. So I learned that, hey, you gotta inhabit a different shell for that. And you know, so and that's how I've lived life. That's how I've survived. That's how I've gotten catharsis, but also how I've navigated the treacherous rocks.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So before we go, I really want to talk about Saga King, the album. So I don't know if listeners know that in addition to the book, Saga Boy, there's also an album, Saga King, which I've been, I don't know, I'll just put it like this: Fighting. I've had that on heavy rotation this week. That's my jam. But the album is really wonderful. It's a really great companion to the book. I was under a pretty strict word count on the book review that I wrote, and I really wanted to talk about the album as well, because there's a couple things happening in there that are amazing. I think the stories in the book are amplified in the album in a lot of ways. Some of them. Your grandmother appears, your mother appears, and those are kind of really just wonderful. But I also, getting back to language and getting back to the mechanics and craft and the how part, in that space of the album, the lyricality, the lyrics, the way that you're communicating in those stories, and again, I see personas in there too, because it's J.O. John Orpheus he's a rock and roll type, and has a fun lifestyle. But I wonder if you could talk about, so first of all, the double threat thing where you're like, oh, I'm gonna put this book out, and I also got this little album thing I'm working on. It's a little bit annoying. I just gotta tell you the truth.
It's a dumb idea, trust me. It's like 2020 me thought it was a great idea. 2021 me that actually had to do it, he was like, what is wrong with you? Why couldn't you be happy with a book and sip mimosas all summer? Like,
and then do the album.
Yeah, wow. First of all, thank you for bringing that up because it's like my most all Trinis are musicians, they say, and I really love it. I love the music. It's raised me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I love being around musicians. I love the creative process. I love performance. Um, I have a deep-seated relationship with it in my body. Like it's transcendent, and it's a really great gift to have because so much of my life I couldn't have survived if I wasn't able to perform.
This is a key point also, and I don't want to interrupt. I just want to say thank you for bringing that up, because the moment when music enters your life in the memoir is a
Mhm.
key moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a profound thing, and and really it goes right back to my grandma because she processed her life through words and through music, through her Bible and her Psalms and her hymns.
Yep.
And so those were her gifts to me so that I could cope with what was to come, because she could see what was to come and I couldn't. And so I felt like she was uploading that ancestral download so that I could get through it. And music was a core piece. Um, as far as the personas and who John Orpheus is, it's like I I made him because almost like I wanted a superhero, my own personal superhero, so that I could make it through, because I felt weak and I felt incapable of dealing, and I felt like I had no idea what was up. And so Jo was like this superhero that was built off of me, and it's me, but it's me in a certain aspect.
Yeah.
And even tonight I was rehearsing because we have a huge recording session all day Sunday, um I'm hearing the songs and being it, and I was like, yo, you need to sometimes I feel like, Jo, who are you? Leave me alone. I just want to be me. But then again, it's the mask. And if you fully surrender to the mask, it actually takes you to a part of yourself, or to a part of myself, that I couldn't get there otherwise.
Right. Right.
So those songs and those personas and those things, the ridiculous things I say, it's almost like, and here's why I did the album, because I kind of was like, look, I've spent 20 years making music. I never fit into any box because I'm not someone that looks around and goes, let me do that because it's hot, which is what a lot of people do. I look inside and I go, what do you have to say? And so a lot of times, because of dichotomies and cultural legacies that I'm struggling with, the music might sound like a punk rock band with a soul singer on it. Well, where do we put that in a business sense, right? And so a lot of the effort of the music press and the industry in Canada has been, oh, the fans always get it, but then they're always like, well, where do we fit him in? And
Yeah.
then and I knew when Saga Boy came out that they would understand the artist and not try, and then that would help them understand the art. And that's exactly what happens. People are like, oh, you're an artist, we don't need to classify it, we just need to take it for what it is. And that's why I had to do it. And a lot of times I feel like, man, I should just sing. I love singing just soul songs with the guitar, and that's where I want to be. And acoustic, I feel like that's really authentic. But the creation of John Orpheus is in of itself is very different from who I am. But when I inhabit it, I find a truth that I can't find any other place.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
That's the other thing. It's clear that you're passionate about it.
Yeah. And talking about full circle, how people speak, I'm like, I get to be a funk dude, and I get to be a dance hall dude, and I get to be a Afrobeat dude, and I get to speak these dialects of Blackness, which for me, that's how I've survived all this time, is being able to like cultivate and nurture the Blackness in places where, I was the only kid, I was the only one in the village.
Right.
You know, right?
Yeah.
So picking up the way Black people spoke made me feel like I was part of something. And music has now become a way of just expressing that and fully inhabiting that. And
Yeah.
you know, it's play en masse. We play en masse.
That's it. That's it. I want to close just with one more question. The last thing I did before I read Saga Boy was I worked on an essay about a time after my father died that my brother and I lived with our grandparents. And my grandmother was just a central figure in my life from that moment. In writing the essay, it occurred to me that she was my salvation. You know, where we had this huge setback, and then we landed in a place of people who were just present and steady and there. And I cleaved to my grandmother too. And for me, Miss Exley, your grandmother, is the quiet hero of the story. She has her own trauma, of course, and her own unprocessed grief, and her life was not easy in many ways. But when I get to that moment in Fella Awoke, in that song where you sing about her being the gardener and you being the soil, I just I connected back to the your writing about her in the book, and then also to my own grandmother. And I thought because we opened before we came online talking about making sure to keep the ancestors present, I thought we could end the night with her and talking about what she meant to you and what it was like to write about that time with her.
Yeah. It's, I mean, someone asked me like what it was like to go back to that time with my grandmother to write about it, and I was like, go back, like I don't feel she's left.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, if I could close my eyes, I could sit right now and hear her singing or talking to me or just, and I need to. In fact, I think I'm my best self when I can hear her voice the clearest. And it's almost like that time of being so under her heel and clinging to her skirts. I uploaded her humanity and her way of moving through life. And we're not the same person, but she had a toolkit of spirituality and of generosity and kindness and song and words and poetry and just an industry. She had a whole toolkit, a whole world that she developed to make her way through life. And I think I uploaded all of that, her humanity. And you know, any good thing I ever do in my life is because I had the honor of knowing her. And to go back to it, it was just easy. Like I didn't feel like a lot of that part of the book where she's there, I wrote that in probably, it's a third of the book. I probably wrote it. It probably took 8% of the work of writing the book, because it was just so present and so easy to evoke. You know, it's special. But it's not just me. Like if I call Aunt Joan, I call Auntie Joan. Auntie Joan's gonna do three things. She's gonna quote scripture, sing hymn, and talk about Miss Exley, her mother. So it's, you know, it's not just me. She just had that impact on people's lives. Like I grew up watching people come back to serve her because she served them when they had nothing. And so going back to write about it was just like it's my Garden of Eden. You know, that's where my innocence lives. That's where I learned to see the world. and it was completely framed by her experience. And to be honest, it's like I could do a lot worse than honoring that legacy.
Yeah.
Like I have done a lot worse than honoring that legacy, but we gonna do better. Tomorrow is a new day.
That's right. I'm so thankful for this time, and for the conversation with you about your book, about your album, about your life. It just really meant a lot to me to read your book and then also talk to you about it.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we definitely got to connect. I feel like getting to know you in this setting is beautiful, but it's all about me. And I got questions for you too.
Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
You come to town, we'll go by Janadas and get some curry doubles and just chop it up.
Yo, y'all feed me. Y'all don't want my attention if you're gonna feed me doubles. That's like
right.
I'm still the kid that spent his travel money on doubles. I'll still do it.
I'll do it again.
Like he's now a resident of St. Paul, Minneapolis, because he spent all his money on doubles.
Can't get back. Now the money to get back.
Yeah, no, it's been so beautiful. Thank you so much for I feel so seen. I feel so like it's really lovely. You have like a bright and lovely light, and I'm lucky that it's been shone on my work and on my person tonight. So thank you so much, Michael.
Well, my pleasure. And I'm just responding to the light I see in you. So that that part was easy.
This is what they call a bromance, right?
That's it. That's how it starts. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Yeah,
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night, and
You
thank
too.
you, Unabridged. Thank you, Matt and Unabridged, for having us. Really beautiful connection. Oh, there he is.
Just popping in to say thank you guys for sharing this conversation with us tonight. It's been awesome hearing you guys talk about the book. So everybody get your copy of Saga Boy.
Yeah. And this is going to be recorded so we can share it, right?
Yeah, it'll go live on our website and all of our social media stuff too. So if anybody listening right now knows this may resonate with somebody else, feel free to share it. We'll have links to watch this conversation, links to get the book. We'll make it easy for you. So
yeah, I'm definitely gonna share with my peoples, man. This has been a beautiful one.
Cool. Well, thank you both for joining us.
Did I lose you?
Thank you.
No, I didn't.
Oh, we're still here.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Cool. Everybody have a good night.
Bye, Matt. Bye, Michael. Take care.
Bye.